Did you ever ask yourself, what does it take to do philosophy? What kind of freedom do you need to have? You cannot do much philosophy in a totalitarian state. But then again, living in a state that guarantees your freedom of speech does not make you a philosopher. Quite on the contrary, sometimes. So what does it take to have the freedom of philosophizing?
A positive one is self-determination. So you are speaking freely when you determine what you say yourself, or when you have sufficient knowledge to take control over your own thoughts.
The freedom of philosophizing is something quite different than the mere freedom of speech.
And I was really quite struck in all these debates that nobody ever questions what you mean by speaking freely. What does it mean to speak freely? I mean, does it just mean that you say whatever you want to say? Are you free when you go out and say stuff you just read on Twitter? Well, at least from one point of view, you could say, no, you're not. And so this book I did on Spinoza and the freedom of philosophizing is basically, it's sort of on the systematic level, it's basically about how Spinoza was the first to give a conception of free speech or of freedom of speaking, which is about this more sort of self-determining kind of freedom.
What kind of freedom are we talking about? One way to find out is to go back and read one of the first treatises on this subject, a treatise published in 1670s in Amsterdam by one of the most fascinating of the early modern philosophers, Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza had much to say about freedom in ethics as well as in politics, and some of what he had to say was interesting, challenging, and controversial.
If you're prejudiced, you can't be free. Because when you're prejudiced, he says, when you're prejudiced, you have to sort of spell it out, just the Latin word. It just means that you prejudge, you made your judgments beforehand. Spinoza has a very nice way of putting this. He uses the verb constantly, is to preoccupy. To be prejudiced is to have your mind preoccupied.
To find out more, join us on Friday, Philosophy After Dark. This week, a discussion with Mogens Laerke on his forthcoming book on Spinoza and the freedom of philosophizing.